Miriam had always worked hard to make a living, but this new job at the Caldwell mansion felt like another world. The mansion stood tall on the edge of town, surrounded by thick trees, tall iron gates, and silence that seemed too perfect. Every corner of the house was polished, the air filled with a strange mix of perfume and something colder, something harder to name. The Caldwells, Mr. and Mrs. were rich, distant, and always busy. Mr. Caldwell rarely spoke, and spent most of his time locked away in his home office. Mrs. Caldwell walked like a queen, spoke like one too, and made it clear she didn't care to socialize with the help. Miriam had worked in big houses before, but something about this one made her uneasy. The silence inside the home was unsettling, as if the walls held secrets and didn't want them to be heard. Her tasks were simple: clean the marble floors, dust the grand staircase, wipe the windows so clear they almost disappeared. But the rules were strict. She was not allowed on the third floor ever. She had asked once, and was told coldly by Mrs. Caldwell, that floor is off limits. No one goes up there. So Miriam kept her head down and worked, though her curiosity grew stronger with each passing day. On the third day of her job, while polishing the stair banisters, she heard it sound so faint she thought her mind was playing tricks on her. A baby crying. Soft, distant, yet clearly the voice of a baby in distress. She looked up the stairs toward the third floor, but the sound vanished as quickly as it came. She froze for a moment, eyes fixed on the top step, but then shook her head and went back to work, thinking maybe she was tired or imagining things. The next day, the crying returned only. This time it was louder, more desperate. It echoed faintly through the chandelier-lit hall as Miriam vacuumed the rug in the main living room. She turned off the vacuum, stood completely still, and listened. The cry came again, a tiny voice, almost pleading, coming from above. Heart racing, she walked quietly to the staircase and stared at the top floor. The door at the top of the stairs was closed, the same door she had been told never to open. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in her small apartment thinking of the cry, the sadness in it, the way her chest had tightened when she heard it. Babies cry, she knew that, but there were no babies in the Caldwell house. At least that's what she had been told. The next day, she asked Mrs. Caldwell, gently, trying not to sound too bold. "Ma'am, I think I heard a baby crying upstairs yesterday," she said carefully, hoping the woman wouldn't lash out. Mrs. Caldwell's expression turned cold, her eyes sharp. "There are no babies in this house," she snapped. "Focus on your job, and never go upstairs." But final words were clear, a warning, maybe even a threat. Miriam nodded and apologized, but inside her mind, a storm was beginning to brew. That evening, the crying returned again, this time while she was mopping the hallway near the stairs. Louder, clearer, longer. She put the mop down and walked up a few steps, just enough to hear more clearly. Yes, it was definitely a baby, real baby, not a cat or some sound from outside. Her heart pounded in her chest, a mix of fear and something else. Concern. Deep, powerful concern. What if something was wrong? What if a child was up there, hurt or abandoned? She told herself she couldn't ignore it again. That night, she returned to the staircase after everyone had gone to bed. The house was quiet, dark, the moon casting pale shadows through the tall windows. She crept slowly up the stairs, her hand trembling as it touched the railing. At the top was the door, the one she was forbidden to open. Her hands searched her apron pockets for the spare keys she had found in the laundry room earlier that day. With a shaky breath, she picked one and slowly inserted it into the keyhole. At first, it didn't turn. Then suddenly, with a small click, it unlocked. Her fingers froze. She hesitated, then pushed the door open slowly. The room inside was dark and dusty, the curtains drawn tight. The air smelled like mold and something worse, something like diapers left too long. And there, in the far corner, was a crib. A baby crib. And inside it, a child, a real, living baby lay, crying face, red and voice hoarse. The baby was pale, weak-looking, wearing a thin onesie, and wrapped in a dirty blanket. A half-empty bottle sat on the floor nearby, untouched. Miriam rushed forward, scooping the baby into her arms. The child was warm but shaking, as if she had been crying for hours, or days. Miriam's heart broke. Who would leave a baby like this? Why? Tears ran down her face as she held the baby close, whispering gently, trying to calm her. Her mind raced. What should she do? She didn't know the full story, but this wasn't right. None of this was right. The room looked untouched, unused. For months, with dust covering the shelves, and yet a living baby had been here all along. She felt her hands trembling as she reached into her apron for her phone. There was no question what she had to do. She dialed 911 with her free hand, her voice shaking as she whispered into the receiver, "Please, I need help. There's a baby. I don't know her name. She's alone. Please come quickly." Her tears flowed as she held the child tighter, feeling the small heartbeat against her chest. She didn't know what this would mean for her job, or what secrets the Caldwells were hiding, but right now, none of that mattered. What mattered was the little life in her arms, the cry that no one else had heard, except her. The old wooden stairs creaked beneath Clara's shoes as she stepped upward, each footfall echoing louder than it should have in the eerie silence of the mansion. Her heart thudded so hard she could hear it in her ears. The crying from upstairs had stopped the moment she'd set her hand on the railing, as if someone knew she was coming. The sudden quiet didn't feel like relief, felt like a warning. She paused for a moment on the landing, her eyes drawn to the long hallway ahead, where several doors lined both sides, all closed, and all silent. Clara's fingers gripped the phone in her apron pocket, her thumb hovering over the emergency dial. Something didn't feel right. The house was too still, the air too thick. For a moment, she questioned if she had imagined the baby's cry, but no, she had heard it clear as day, soft, desperate, and close. She had cleaned this house every day for 3 weeks, and never once seen a crib, a toy, or a child. The elderly couple who owned the mansion never mentioned having children or grandchildren visiting. They kept to themselves, always polite, but distant, as if the walls of this house were better company to them than any living soul. Clara approached the second door on the left, the one that always stayed locked, even when she cleaned the upstairs rooms. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached out and gently pressed her ear against the wooden frame. At first, there was nothing, but then, so faint it could have been mistaken for the wind. She heard the softest hiccup, like a baby who had cried too long and was now out of tears. Clara's heart seized. Without thinking, she jiggled the doorknob. Locked, just as always. She knocked gently, her voice catching in her throat. "Hello? Is someone in there?" she whispered, half hoping there would be no answer. But silence was her only reply. Clara backed away, pulling her phone from her pocket, her thumb finally pressing the numbers. 911. She hadn't hit call yet, not without knowing more. Just then, she noticed something strange near the base of the door, scratch marks on the wood, like someone had clawed at it from the inside. Fresh, Clara felt the hairs on her neck rise. She leaned down and called softly again. "It's okay, I'm here to help." A sudden bang from inside the room made her jump, a single thud followed by silence once again. That was enough. She pressed call. The dispatcher's voice came through, clear. 911. "What's your emergency?" Clara's voice shook as she spoke. "I'm a maid at the Ashwood estate on Belridge Road. I heard a baby crying from a locked room upstairs. I think there might be a child locked inside." The dispatcher asked her to stay calm and remain on the line. Help was on the way. Clara gave her the details, her eyes never leaving the door. She felt like she was being watched, but the hallway was empty, and the house still held its breath. A few minutes passed like hours. Then suddenly, the crying began again, desperate, undeniable. It was real. Clara knelt by the door, speaking gently, trying to comfort whoever was inside. The crying intensified, then abruptly stopped. A click echoed from the hallway. Clara turned quickly to see the old man, Mr. Ashwood, standing at the end of the hall, holding a ring of keys. His face was calm, too calm. "You called someone?" he asked, his voice quiet, but loaded with something cold. Clara stood up slowly, hiding the phone behind her back. "There's a baby crying in this room," she said. "I heard it. Please, just open the door." Mr. Ashwood didn't move. "There's nothing in that room," he replied. "It's been locked for years. There's no child here." Clara shook her head. "I heard it. I still hear it." But now, the room was silent again. Mr. Ashwood sighed, walking slowly toward her. "Sometimes old houses make strange sounds," he said. "Echoes. You're tired. Maybe your mind is playing tricks." Clara stood her ground. "Then let me see inside. Just open it, please." He looked at her for a long moment, then at the door. "You don't want to see what's in there," he said quietly, almost to himself. Clara's skin prickled. "What do you mean?" But before he could answer, flashing red and blue lights lit up the windows. The police had arrived. Mr. Ashwood didn't move as officers came rushing up the stairs, their radios crackling. Clara ran to them, breathless. That room, she pointed. A baby. Locked inside. I heard it. The officers didn't hesitate. They approached the door, demanded the keys from Mr. Ashwood, who handed them over without a word. When they opened the door, a gust of cold air swept through the hallway. Inside, the room was dark, the curtains drawn, the air stale and heavy. Clara peered over their shoulders. There was no baby, no crib, just dust-covered furniture, old boxes, and a broken rocking chair that still rocked slightly, as if someone had just been sitting in it. Clara's heart sank. Was she wrong? But then, one of the officers stepped in and shone his flashlight toward a corner. There, beneath an old sheet, was a baby blanket, soft, pink, and stained with something dark. Next to it, an old baby monitor, its red light blinking. There's something here, one of the officers said. Another opened one of the boxes and found old baby clothes, some with tags still on. Clara stood frozen, confused and afraid. The officer turned to her. "Ma'am, are you sure you heard a baby today?" She nodded quickly. "I did. I swear I did." The officer exchanged a look with his partner. "You better come downstairs. With us." Behind them, Mr. Ashwood stood silent, watching the scene unfold with a distant, hollow expression. The dispatcher's voice still echoed faintly from Clara's phone, still in her hand. "Ma'am, are you okay?" But Clara couldn't answer. Her mind raced. What had she really heard? Why did this room, locked for years, still hold the memory of a child? And what secret were the Ashwoods hiding behind that quiet door, and their empty smiles? As the officers began searching the room more thoroughly, Clara was led downstairs, the sound of creaking wood fading behind her. She looked back one last time, and in that dark hallway, just for a moment, she thought she heard it again, a soft cry, faint and distant, like a whisper from a forgotten past. The moment Lisa stepped back from the now-opened nursery door, she felt something shift, not in the room, but deep within her. It wasn't just what she saw that haunted her, was what she didn't. The crib was there, the mobile gently spinning, from a breeze that shouldn't have existed, but the baby was gone. Her heart pounded as she called out again, softly this time. "Hello? Is someone there?" Her voice broke as it touched the air, barely louder than a whisper. Afraid of disturbing whatever truth lay buried in that room, she backed out slowly, her eyes scanning every inch. There were signs of life, but they were dated, dusty. The baby monitor blinked, but no sound came through. Her fingers trembled as she pressed the play button on the monitor's saved recording, and a static-filled lullaby played, followed by a woman's soft voice humming. It didn't belong to the family she worked for, she was sure of that. Then a muffled cry played through the device, so real that Lisa felt it in her chest, the same cry she had heard the day before. Panic gripped her as she remembered the locked attic room 2 doors down. One the family said was just storage, but now her gut told her otherwise. She moved quickly, but quietly down the hall, her rubber-soled shoes making no noise on the hardwood floor. She tried the attic door, still locked. She bent to look at the handle, and noticed faint scratches, like someone, or something, had tried to open it from the inside. Lisa didn't waste another second. She raced downstairs to grab the spare keys from the kitchen drawer, the ones she was told only for emergencies. This was one. Key in hand, she ran back, her breath short, her mind spinning. She unlocked the door, heart pounding, and pushed it open slowly. The air was cold. It smelled of mildew and something older forgotten. She stepped into the dark, narrow staircase, and climbed one step at a time. The light switch didn't work. At the top, a dim beam of light filtered through a small, dirty window. She squinted, letting her eyes adjust, and as she turned the corner, she gasped. In the corner of the attic, behind a pile of dusty furniture and old boxes, was a crib covered in a gray sheet. Lisa rushed forward and yanked it off. The crib was empty, but the mattress inside was warm. A baby had been there. Recently her hands flew to her mouth. She didn't know whether to scream or cry. That's when she noticed the camera, an old recording camcorder on a tripod, pointed directly at the crib. She pressed rewind and play, and what she saw made her knees buckle. A woman in a nurse uniform placed a baby into the crib and kissed its forehead, whispering something the camera's mic didn't catch. But it wasn't the baby's mother. Lisa knew her employers. This woman was someone else. Someone they had never mentioned. And then it hit her. The cries weren't from the past, they were live. The monitor downstairs must be connected. That meant someone had been here recently. Lisa turned sharply, her breath catching in her throat. The attic was still. Too still. She felt watched. She ran down the stairs and out of the attic, slamming the door behind her and locking it. Her mind raced. Had the baby been hidden here? Who was the woman? Why was no one else in the family talking about this? She had too many questions and nowhere to take them. She sat on the floor of the hallway, staring at the attic door, trying to decide what to do. That's when she heard the faintest sound. Again the softest cry, this time not upstairs but coming from the vent beside her. Lisa crawled toward it and put her ear close. The cry grew louder. There was a crawl space behind the wall. She didn't even know that part of the house existed. She followed the wall to the end of the hallway, where a small panel sat flush with the wallpaper. Her fingers traced it, finding a tiny latch. It popped open, revealing a narrow crawl space covered in insulation and darkness. She grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight. The cry became clearer, now real, desperate. She crawled inside, pushing past the cobwebs, her heart thudding so loudly it filled the space. And then she saw her, a tiny baby, swaddled in a tattered blanket, lying in a small makeshift basket. Beside her, a used baby bottle and a worn-out stuffed rabbit. Lisa scooped the baby up, tears streaming down her face. "It's okay, I've got you," she whispered. But she knew this wasn't over. Someone had placed the baby there. Someone who didn't want her found. And someone who might be back very soon. Lisa backed out of the crawl space, clutching the baby tightly, and dialed 911 for the second time in 2 days. But this time, she wasn't just reacting. She was ready to fight for the truth. Lisa held the baby tightly in her arms as the phone rang in her trembling hand, her voice cracking as she whispered into it, telling the emergency operator everything she had just discovered: the hidden baby in the wall, the attic room, the camera, and the strange woman on the tape. But even as she spoke, her eyes stayed fixed on the hallway, her ears tuned for footsteps that might come at any moment. Because someone had gone through a lot of trouble to keep this baby hidden, and that someone might already know she had found her. The operator assured her that help was on the way, and Lisa hung up, clutching the baby closer, trying to keep her calm as she stepped into the living room just as the front door creaked open, not from her, not from the wind, but from someone outside. And when she turned to look, her heart nearly stopped. It was Mrs. Bellamy, the woman of the house, the one who had hired her just weeks ago with a gentle smile and soft voice. And yet now that same woman stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the baby in Lisa's arms like she had just seen a ghost, her face draining of color, her shopping bags falling from her hands, fruits rolling across the hardwood floor as the silence between them stretched thin and sharp, like a wire ready to snap. And then, with a strange calmness, Mrs. Bellamy closed the door behind her and said softly, "You weren't supposed to find her." And that's when Lisa knew something much darker had been happening here all along. Mrs. Bellamy's voice didn't shake as she walked forward, eyes locked on the child, and began to explain, not out of panic, but almost like she had rehearsed this in her mind many times before, telling Lisa that the baby's name was Eva, and that she wasn't supposed to exist, at least not officially, because Eva was the child of her husband's late sister, a woman who had suffered from mental illness and died during childbirth in that very house, and no one in the family wanted the scandal to go public, so they agreed to keep the baby hidden while deciding what to do. But the decision had been to quietly place her in long-term care, until Mr. Bellamy, who Lisa had barely seen since she started, insisted she stay under the roof where she was born, hidden but safe, until the time was right, whatever that meant, and they hired a private caretaker to tend to her at night, while Lisa was asleep, until something went wrong a few weeks ago, and the caretaker simply vanished, leaving Eva alone, crying in hidden corners. And instead of calling for help, they panicked, moved her from room to room, hiding her deeper each day, thinking no one would hear, but Lisa had. And now she stood face to face with the woman who had been lying to her from day one. Lisa didn't know what to say, her mind spinning, because though she could see that Mrs. Bellamy wasn't cruel in her expression, there was still something terrifying about her calmness, as if she had lived with this secret for so long it no longer felt wrong. And just then, the baby whimpered, snapping both women out of the stillness, and Lisa backed away, saying she had called the police and they'd be here any minute, hoping that would keep her safe. But Mrs. Bellamy's face remained unreadable. She didn't lunge or plead. She simply said, "You don't understand. They'll take her away and put her in the system, and we can't let that happen." And Lisa shook her head, stepping further back, saying, "You already put her in a worse place." And just then, red and blue lights flashed outside, sirens slicing through the quiet street as a car pulled up, and Lisa felt a wave of relief. But when she turned back to Mrs. Bellamy, the woman was no longer there, just the sound of hurried steps climbing the stairs, the attic door slamming shut and Lisa didn't wait. She ran to the front door, opened it, and rushed into the arms of the officers who entered moments later. She handed them the baby, her voice finally breaking as she tried to explain everything, this time in full detail, and they moved quickly, splitting up, one heading upstairs while the other checked the crawl space Lisa had described, and minutes later, they found Mrs. Bellamy in the attic. Not hiding, but sitting silently by the old crib, hands folded, eyes staring into the dusty light as if waiting for something, or maybe nothing, and when they gently pulled her to her feet and led her downstairs, she didn't resist, only whispered. She was better off here, over and over again, as if trying to convince herself more than anyone else. Lisa watched from the porch as Mrs. Bellamy was placed into the back of the police car, and soon after, the officers returned to tell her that Child Protective Services were on the way, and that she had done the right thing. But Lisa didn't feel heroic. She felt shaken, confused, wondering how many other secrets that house still held, wondering how a family could hide something so important for so long, and most of all, wondering why her heart still hurt when she looked back at the window upstairs and saw the soft spinning of the nursery mobile in the empty room. As the ambulance pulled away from the house, flashing red and blue lights against the early morning sky, Maria stood on the porch with her hands trembling, watching the baby now safely in the care of the paramedics, finally getting the help he had been denied for so long. The officers had thanked her, the social workers had promised to stay in touch, and the neighbors had come out silently, their expressions a mix of shock and guilt for not noticing what had been hidden behind closed doors. The mother of the baby, a woman who had lived in fear and silence, was now in protective custody. Her voice finally heard, because one maid had chosen not to ignore a sound. Maria had been offered time off, therapy, even a medal for her bravery. But all she could think about was the baby's face, the way he had clung to her, the tiny hand wrapping around her finger, as if he knew she was his only hope. Weeks passed, and the house that had once been full of secrets was now empty. But the story didn't end there. One morning, Maria received a letter in the mail. It was from the baby's mother, thanking her for giving them both a second chance at life and revealing that she had named the baby Elijah, meaning "My God is salvation." Because in her darkest moment, someone had come like an angel. Moved by the words, Maria visited the hospital, not as a maid this time, but as someone who had changed the course of her life. When she saw Elijah again, his cheeks fuller, his eyes brighter, she couldn't stop the tears. The doctors said he was recovering well and had responded positively to treatment. But what surprised Maria the most was the woman waiting outside the hospital room, the baby's mother now in therapy, working hard, rebuilding her life. She asked Maria to be part of their future, not just as a helper, but as family. It was an emotional moment. Two women from very different worlds connected by a child, pain, and courage. Months turned into years, and Maria no longer worked as a maid. She had started a small organization helping women in abusive homes, and she used her story to remind others that being silent can destroy, but listening, truly listening, can save. Elijah grew up knowing that a stranger had once heard his cry and didn't walk away. And on his 5th birthday, standing between the two women who had fought for him, he held their hands and smiled, unaware of how powerful that smile was. For Maria, it was a new beginning, not just for her, but for everyone who believed that sometimes the smallest sound can lead to the biggest change.